What's up guys, welcome back to the channel. I got a few upgrades for the Canik TP9sfx and I want to show you guys how to install. So let's jump into it. So a little while ago I did an overview video on this Canik TP9sfx. You guys seem to like that video. I'll link it below if you haven't seen that one. But I got a few upgrades for it. These are both from Canik. I got a Magwell for it and then a performance trigger shoe from Canik for it. That was one of my biggest complaints, was the take up on the trigger when I did that overview video. So I want to change it up and see how it changes the trigger, if it shortens that pre-travel. So let's hit the bench and I'll show you how to install these. Alright, so like I said, I got a new trigger shoe and a new Magwell. Both are made by Canik. This trigger claims to shorten up the pre-travel. I'll show you guys that. How much pre-travel that trigger has. It's a bunch. I'm going to do a trigger pull test just to see if it changes the trigger weight after we install that new trigger shoe. £4, 5.9 ounces. £4, 8.5 ounces. So I just want to do that just to double check and see if this trigger shoe actually changes the pull weight. So first off, obviously you want to make sure your gun is empty. We'll pull this slide off. Set it off to the side. A few tools you're going to need are a bench block or a roll of tape and some punches. Now you will need a teeny tiny little punch for the other side of this takedown lever to get it off. We'll start by pulling these 3 pins out, driving them out, and then I'll tell you how to get the other side of this takedown lever off. This takedown lever has a pin that goes all the way through the locking block, through this locking lug, and it has these little levers on both sides, just like this. And there's a little roll pin that goes right down through the middle. I took this off camera because it was kind of a pain. I used an extremely small, tiny punch right up against the frame to push that out. It did mar up the frame just a little bit, but it came out, and then I pried it off of there. When you push this pin out, make sure you hold down on that locking lug so it doesn't spring up out at you. Push that locking lug up out of there. The spring will come with it. Then just take one of your punches and pry up on this locking block. It should come right out. This little spring goes right in this little hole right here. That's the spring tension on this slide lock. Now that that's out, we should be able to take a punch and just pry up on this trigger housing a little bit and pry the whole thing out of there. Like that. And this whole thing should come out. We'll set our frame to the side. Now we got to drive this little roll pin out to take the trigger bar off. I'm going to pull this off of the trigger housing so it's easier to work with. So I'll just take this small roll pin punch and drive this pin halfway out so that trigger bar will come free. Didn't take much. That comes right off. We'll set that old trigger shoe aside. The new trigger shoe is anodized aluminum. It already has a new roll pin pre-installed. So I'll just slide it in there, get that lined up. Flip this over nice and gently and just slightly tap on this to try and get it just started in that trigger bar. You know what, I'm actually going to use this as a slave pin. So that little roll pin didn't want to budge, so I took it over to the vise and did the old Apex tactical trigger install trick. Put it in the vise with a business card around it and just got it started till it grabbed a hold of that trigger bar. And then I'll finish it off with this little punch. I just want it flush on both sides. Now I can reinstall it on in our trigger housing. That little spring just hooks right on that little hook. And now we can set this whole thing back in our frame. So I'll drop this trigger shoe down in there first. And then just drop it down in there, make sure it's seated. Pins I took out. There's one with double grooves. I don't know if you can see that or not. That one goes through the trigger shoe. This longer roll pin is the front roll pin, and this shorter one is for the trigger housing. So I'll put this shorter one back in. And I'm going to take my takedown lever, set that in. My little spring for the takedown lever. Put it right in its little hole and lower it down right on top of it like that. Then I'll take my locking block and slowly drop it in. Make sure it's seated down in there. Take my little spring for that that lug that holds the slide. Takedown lug, whatever you want to call it. And I'll depress that and drop that pin right through the middle of that so it holds it. My front roll pin that goes through the locking block. Drive it back through. Then I'll take my trigger pin, get it started on the one side. Then I'll flip it over because we need to get this slide stop lined up as well as that hole that goes through the trigger. So I'm going to use this punch as kind of a slave pin to hold that stuff in place. You might have to wiggle it around a little bit. And then I'll just take my hammer and kind of hold some pressure on that and slowly drive it through. Until it goes in and pushes your punch out. I'm going to make sure that's flushed up. Now we got to put the other side of that takedown lever on there. So I'll just slide that on the pin. Make sure it snaps on there. Then it has this little teeny roll pin that I'll drive down through the top. So I got that little roll pin started, and I'll use my little roll pin bunch to push some pressure down on that, because that lever is spring loaded. I want it bottomed out while I drive it in so it doesn't just sit and bounce. Like that. So that's the trigger install. Now we can just throw our slide back on. So here's the new take up. So I would say it cut it about, I don't know, in half. And the trigger also feels a little bit lighter to me. Crisp reset. So now that's done, we'll throw this Magwell on. So this is the Magwell from Canik. It's supposed to be tungsten. The color's a little different than that slide, which is also tungsten. But to throw this on, I'm going to pull this slide off real quick because it's a little heavy on this. You drive this little pin out right here that holds that back strap on. Take our Magwell, and this thing pivots, so we'll roll that back out of the way, lock it over the front, snap it down on, and then this rolls up in the back. Then we just put that pin back in. So that's the Magwell. I'll throw this slide on. So that's what it looks like with the trigger and the Magwell installed. That Magwell is a little bit shinier than I would have liked. I was hoping it would match that slide a little more. But here's the factory magazine. It fits just fine in there. Now let's do another trigger pull test and see if it lightened it up at all. £3 pounds, 15 ounces, so about a pound lower. £3 pounds, 10 ounces. So it dropped the trigger weight about a pound and cut that take up in half, I would say. Still has that clean brake and the clean reset. So that's a plus. So that's the install. Let's jump back up top and take a look at it. All right, so that's the install of the new trigger shoe from Canik and that new Magwell, also from Canik. That Magwell is beveled pretty good. I'm sure that'll help with reloads. Like I said, I wish the color matched the slide a little more. They said it was tungsten, but that's a little bit of a lighter aluminum type color compared to that tungsten. And that trigger is greatly improved in my opinion. You got about half the take up, and we dropped about a pound on our trigger weight by adding that trigger. Now these are not expensive. I think for both of them I was around at $100. So that's not a hefty price to pay for a new flat face trigger shoe that feels a lot better and a Magwell. But like I said, I do wish that Magwell matched a little closer. You can see the difference between the base pad and that Magwell, how off that color is. But overall, I think that dressed up the gun a little bit and will improve the take up and follow-up shots and stuff like that. In the description box, I'll throw a link that'll take you over to our website, where I'll link to this trigger and to this Magwell if you guys want to go check them out. Also, I'll throw a link to our Instagram page. And as always, don't forget to subscribe, hit that thumbs up button, and we'll check you guys on the next one.